In the 1970s, during a decade of major social and cultural changes in the United States, a woman named Carla Moran lived with her children in a small bungalow in the city of Los Angeles, California. Her daily life was calm, marked by household chores and raising her kids alone, after the early loss of her husband. Despite facing the common challenges of being a single mother, Carla managed to keep her house organized and her children happy. She had a modest job and spent her days between work and family responsibilities, without any apparent complications. However, one quiet and seemingly normal night would forever change the peace Carla tried to maintain. While sleeping, something invaded her room, not physically, but in a way that felt just as real as any physical threat. During her sleep, Carla was violently attacked by an invisible force, whose presence was tangible and suffocating. She woke up terrified, feeling trapped, unable to move or scream, as if she were being held down by hands she could not see. The attack was brutal and unexpected, causing both physical harm and deep emotional trauma. She would later report that she felt touches, pressure, and extremely invasive movements, as if she were being controlled against her will. After the incident, Carla remained motionless on the bed for several minutes, trying to understand what had happened. Her body ached and her breathing was fast. She looked around and realized she was completely alone, but the feeling that something was still there never left her. The next day, while trying to resume her routine, Carla noticed that the house seemed different. Objects began to move on their own. Glasses fell from the table without any apparent reason. Doors slammed shut even when closed, and strange sounds echoed through the walls. These events were inexplicable and disturbing. There was no wind, no animals inside the house, and not even the children were touching things. It was as if the house itself had come to life, reacting to Carla's feelings of fear and confusion. Frightened and unsure of whom to share this with, Carla decided to temporarily flee with her children. She sought shelter at the house of her best friend, Cindy Nash, hoping to find some peace away from that oppressive environment. At Cindy's house, Carla tried to relax, but the feeling of being watched continued. Even away from home, she felt that the entity, or whatever it was still connected to her in some way. After a few days, convinced that perhaps it was all just an extended nightmare, Carla decided to return home. She wanted to reclaim her normality, to regain the space she had lost to fear. But as soon as she crossed the front door, she felt an immediate change in the air. Breathing became more difficult, as if the very environment rejected her. And shortly after, something very strange happened on the road. While driving, her car suddenly lost control, despite no visible mechanical problems. The steering wheel turned on its own, the brakes failed, and the vehicle veered abruptly, nearly colliding with another car. Carla narrowly escaped a serious accident, but she got out of the car shaking and in shock. That experience only increased her certainty that something supernatural was acting against her, trying to hurt her. More desperate than ever and without understanding what was happening, Carla began seeking professional help, thinking that perhaps a specialist could make sense of it all. Little did she know that this would be only the beginning of a continuous confrontation with an invisible and relentless force. With her heart full of fear and confusion, Carla decided she needed help. Her emotional state was fragile, and the inexplicable events were becoming increasingly frequent and terrifying. Her best friend, Cindy Nash, noticing how shaken Carla was, insisted that she see a mental health professional. After all, maybe there was a psychological explanation for everything she was experiencing. Reluctantly, but aware that she couldn't continue alone, Carla scheduled an appointment with Dr. Snyderman, a respected psychiatrist in the area. She hoped to find answers or, at least, some relief for her tired mind. When she arrived at the doctor's office, Carla was tense. She wore discreet clothes and seemed nervous, looking around as if afraid that something was following her there too. During the session, she told Dr. Snyderman about the night she was violently attacked by an invisible force, about the objects that moved on their own, and about the car that almost killed her. Each word came out with difficulty, as if speaking it aloud made everything even more real. The doctor listened carefully, taking notes and interrupting only to clarify some points. He seemed understanding, but his expression showed skepticism. After hearing everything, Dr. Snyderman suggested that Carla might be going through a delicate psychological moment, possibly triggered by old traumas or accumulated emotional pressures. Even without denying her experiences, he believed that part of what she described could be the result of mental disorders, such as hallucinations or dissociative episodes caused by extreme stress. Carla, however, showed the doctor visible marks on her body, bruises and scratches that appeared without explanation. Some were in hard-to-reach places, which reinforced her version that none of this was self-inflicted. Dr. Snyderman examined the injuries carefully, but maintained his initial stance. Even if physical, they could have a psychological origin, such as bodily manifestations of deep trauma. Still, he agreed to continue the follow-up, promising to keep an open mind. He said he wanted to better understand the environment where Carla lived and how the children reacted to the situation. A few days later, the psychiatrist visited Carla's home, where he had the opportunity to meet her children and observe the environment where the supposed events occurred. During that visit, Carla told him about her difficult past. She had been a victim of sexual abuse as a child, became pregnant young, and lost her first husband under tragic circumstances. These revelations made Dr. Snyderman even more convinced that the problem was internal, an echo of old traumas now manifesting in strange and frightening ways. However, while they were talking, something unexpected happened inside the house, right before the doctor's eyes. An event that, although brief, would leave doubts hanging in the air and begin to shake the doctor's own certainty. After returning to his office, Dr. Snyderman called a meeting with other psychiatrists from the same medical group to discuss Carla's case. During the meeting, he presented Carla's symptoms, the reports of supernatural events, and the physical marks found on her body. Among those present was Dr. Weber, a more skeptical colleague who was less willing to consider any possibility outside the scientific field. He firmly believed that everything was the result of Carla's imagination, fueled by old traumas and emotional frustrations. During the discussion, Dr. Weber suggested that Carla was living a kind of collective illusion, where she herself created situations that ended up influencing her children and even others around her. Meanwhile, Carla waited at home, unaware of the doctor's theories about her life. She already felt overwhelmed by constant fear, but still held on to hope that someone could understand what she was going through. But the entity, or whatever it was not willing to let her breathe. That same night, while sleeping, Carla was attacked again, this time in an even more disturbing way. She woke up with intense sensations of invasive touches, as if invisible hands were exploring her body with malicious intentions. Her heart raced and she tried to scream, but her voice vanished as if being muffled by a superior force. To make matters worse, her children, who were sleeping in the next room, heard the strange noises and ran in. What they saw shocked them deeply. Carla was paralyzed on the bed, with a terrified expression, while objects flew around the room. Her older son, driven by the instinct to protect his mother, tried to intervene. But as soon as he approached the bed, he received a strong electric shock strong enough to knock him to the ground. The boy fell unconscious for a few seconds and, upon regaining consciousness, realized that his wrist was swollen and painful. It seemed broken. He looked at Carla in shock, realizing that something invisible had been hovering over her. When Carla finally managed to move, she ran to her son, crying and apologizing for putting him in danger. She knew this wasn't just a personal battle anymore. Now her children were involved too. Despite the trauma, the boy insisted he had seen something. He said it wasn't just wind or imagination. There was something there, hovering over his mother, doing things he had never seen before. Desperate, Carla immediately called Dr. Snyderman, telling him what had happened and demanding answers. She asked if it was possible that an entity was really causing this, or if she was completely losing her mind. The doctor listened in silence, visibly shaken by the report. For the first time, he began to doubt his own certainties. Perhaps there was something beyond human understanding acting there, and Carla was not making anything up. The next morning, Carla was taken to the hospital along with her son, who was in pain and trembling with fear when talking about what he had seen. As the doctors examined the boy, Carla sat silently, staring at the floor. She looked exhausted, as if each new experience was stealing a little more of her strength. When they left the hospital, she decided to go back home, even though she didn't feel safe. She knew that running wouldn't solve anything. That thing followed her, no matter where she was. Back at the bungalow, Carla called Dr. Snyderman again, asking for urgent help. This time, he promised to come personally, wanting to see for himself what was happening. When the psychiatrist arrived, he noticed that the environment was different from before. There was a feeling of pressure in the air, as if something invisible was watching their every move. Carla told him everything in detail. The whispered voices at night, the marks that appeared out of nowhere, the objects that moved on their own. And for the first time, she mentioned that the entity seemed to have a specific desire to control her. Dr. Snyderman listened carefully, but still tried to maintain his rational posture. He suggested temporary hospitalization for observation, thinking it might help Carla better understand what was happening to her. However, Carla reacted with anger and frustration. She refused to believe that everything was just a product of her mind. "How can you think I would make this up?" she asked, clearly hurt. During the conversation, the doctor made an even more delicate suggestion, that Carla might be projecting confused feelings about her own family. He even implied that her feelings toward her son might be distorted. That idea felt like a direct blow. Carla burst into tears and sent the psychiatrist away immediately. She felt betrayed, as if she were being treated as crazy when all she wanted was to be heard and understood. Alone again, Carla sought comfort in Cindy, her trusted friend. They talked for hours and Carla poured out everything, from the attack to the last conversation with the doctor. It was then that Cindy decided they needed to seek answers outside the traditional medical world. If the mental health professionals didn't believe her, perhaps someone from the supernatural side could help. Together, they visited a bookstore specializing in occultism and paranormality. There, they met two researchers who had been studying cases like Carla's for years. Initially skeptical, the parapsychologists listened carefully to Carla's story. When they realized how shaken and sincere she was, they decided to visit her home to investigate personally. For the first time, Carla felt signs of hope. For the first time, someone believed her, or at least was willing to discover the truth. The next morning, after the meeting at the bookstore, Carla prepared to receive the two parapsychologists at her house. She was nervous, but there was something different in the air. For the first time, she felt that someone was willing to listen without judgment. The researchers arrived together. An older man, wearing glasses and a calm posture, and a younger woman, who seemed skeptical but interested. They brought simple equipment, recorders, compasses, flashlights, and some instruments to measure changes in the ambient temperature. Upon entering the house, both made sure to examine the place carefully. They walked through each room, observing walls, windows, and doors as if they were looking for something specific. "This place has a strange energy," commented the woman, while holding a compass that spun without any apparent reason. The man nodded, staring directly at Carla, as if trying to read something beyond what she was saying. During the first hours of the investigation, nothing unusual happened. Carla showed them parts of the house where events usually occurred most frequently, including her bedroom and the kitchen, where glasses fell on their own and cabinets opened violently. But then, when everyone was starting to think this might just be a fruitless visit, the environment changed abruptly. A cold wind appeared out of nowhere, even though all the windows were closed. The ceiling lights flickered twice before turning off completely. The recorder started capturing sounds that didn't come from any visible direction. Low, distorted whispers echoed as if someone was speaking near the microphone, but no one was close. Carla curled up in a corner, arms around her body, shivering with fear. She already knew that type of feeling, and she knew it wasn't her imagination. The parapsychologists, until then skeptical, were visibly impressed. The older man was the first to react. He asked for absolute silence and activated the recorder again. This time, they clearly heard a male voice say a single word, "Get out." No one in the room had spoken those words. The woman, now with teary eyes, looked at Carla and asked, "Does this always happen?" Carla responded with a nod, unable to speak. She had already stopped crying. She had learned that tears didn't help against something invisible, cruel, and persistent. The researchers decided to return the next day with more equipment and would contact their team leader, Dr. Cooley, one of the leading experts in paranormal phenomena in the region. When they left, Carla took a deep breath, relieved. For the first time, she wasn't alone in this. There were witnesses, and now someone was willing to study the case seriously. The next day, the parapsychologists returned accompanied by Dr. Cooley, a middle-aged man wearing discreet clothes and carrying a folder full of notes. With him came more advanced equipment: night cameras, thermal sensors, and devices capable of detecting magnetic changes in the environment. It was clear that he took the case seriously, and this brought Carla a little peace of mind. With the equipment set up and the environment prepared, the team of parapsychologists began a detailed surveillance inside Carla's house. The goal was to capture any signal that could be analyzed later: sounds, images, or changes in the energy of the location. Dr. Cooley, the team leader, explained to Carla that many cases like hers were difficult to prove, but he had already witnessed similar phenomena in other investigations. This brought Carla some relief. Finally, she felt heard. During the first hours of observation, nothing unusual happened. The researchers took notes, made adjustments to the equipment, and talked among themselves, keeping the atmosphere light so Carla wouldn't get more nervous than she already was. But around midnight, something changed. The temperature in the main bedroom began to drop rapidly, even though the heater was working normally. Carla, sitting on the couch, shivered as she felt the intense cold invading her body. One of the magnetic sensors started beeping, indicating a strong anomaly in the environment. At the same time, the recorder captured a low sound, like a distant whisper, coming from no specific direction. Dr. Cooley turned on a flashlight and slowly walked down the hallway, while the rest of the team monitored the cameras. Suddenly, a muffled scream echoed from the living room. It was Carla, trying to stand up but appearing to be held back. She looked at everyone with terrified eyes, unable to speak. Her body was stiff, as if invisible hands were holding her tightly. The researchers ran to her, but couldn't see anything physically restraining her. Then, one of the night vision cameras captured a dark figure quickly moving through the hallway. It was only a shadow, but its shape seemed human and was clearly present in the recording. Dr. Cooley was shocked. He had spent years studying paranormal cases, but few had such clear evidence. "This isn't a fraud," he said, looking directly at Carla. "Something is here." The team decided to keep the surveillance going for a few more hours, increasing the number of cameras and positioning the sensors in strategic points of the house. They wanted to capture more information before ending the initial investigation. Meanwhile, Dr. Snyderman appeared at the door of the house, surprising everyone. He had found out that Carla was working with parapsychologists and wanted to know why. As soon as he entered, however, he realized the environment was different. The psychiatrist tried to convince Carla that everything might still have a rational explanation, suggesting it could be an environmental problem or even a case of collective illusion. But when he saw the images captured by the camera, he fell silent. For a few seconds, Dr. Snyderman stared at the screen. The image clearly showed a dark figure sliding down the hallway, as if it had its own consciousness. No wind, no electric current, no logical explanation. Then he turned to Carla and apologized for doubting her. "Maybe I was too quick to judge," he admitted with a softer voice. "If you need me, I'll be here, not as a doctor, but as someone who now understands that this is real." Carla, emotional, thanked him. For the first time, someone who had doubted her had recognized the truth. And although she still feared the presence haunting her home, she felt stronger knowing she had allies in the battle against the invisible. One night, Jerry decided to visit Carla. He knew the case, but still had doubts about its truthfulness. As many did, he thought part of the story could be exaggeration or extreme stress. During the night, while the two talked in the living room, the climate inside the house began to cool slowly. First, it was just a slight chill, like if a window had been opened, but quickly the temperature dropped so much that both began to tremble. The sounds started next. Low whispers, almost inaudible, coming from places where no one was. Jerry looked around, confused, but didn't see anything unusual. However, Carla already knew those signs and felt her heart race. Suddenly, Carla was violently pulled backward, even without anyone touching her. She fell onto the bed and seemed trapped, as if invisible hands were holding her tightly. Her body twisted involuntarily, and she moaned in pain and fear. Jerry ran to her, trying to lift her up, but couldn't move her. It was as if something very strong was keeping Carla immobilized. He shouted her name repeatedly, but she didn't respond. Her eyes were wide open, fixed on some invisible point in the air. Then worse things started to happen. Carla was touched by something unseen. Invisible fingers moved across her body, making her release sounds of disgust and desperation. She tried to fight back, but couldn't move. Jerry, horrified, tried to intervene physically, but every time he approached her, an invisible force pushed him away. One of them threw him against the wall with such violence that he momentarily lost his breath. At that moment, Carla's son entered the room, drawn by the screams. The boy, still traumatized by the previous attack, saw Jerry near his mother and, without understanding what was happening, thought he was hurting her. Without thinking twice, the boy grabbed Jerry with all his strength, trying to pull him away from Carla. "Don't touch her," he shouted, punching the man repeatedly. Jerry, still in shock, didn't react, just tried to explain that he wasn't doing any harm. After a few chaotic minutes, Carla was finally released. She took a deep breath, trembling, and looked at Jerry with tear-filled eyes. "Did you see?" she asked weakly. Jerry nodded, speechless, still processing what he had just experienced. The two decided to leave the house immediately and took Carla to the hospital, where she would be physically examined. There, doctors confirmed recent marks on her body, unexplainable bruises and scratches. That night, Jerry made a difficult decision. When leaving the hospital, he told Carla that he needed to step back. "I wanted to help you," he said emotionally, "but I don't know how to deal with this. This is bigger than any of us." After the breakup with Jerry and the recent attacks becoming increasingly violent, Carla knew she couldn't continue living in that house. The entity seemed to have a clear focus on her, and it was getting stronger. Despite the fear, she decided to go ahead with a plan developed by the parapsychologists led by Dr. Cooley. They proposed an unusual experiment to attract the entity into a controlled environment and try to contain it physically. The plan was ambitious. An exact replica of Carla's house would be built in a specialized laboratory. All rooms would be reproduced in detail, including furniture, personal objects, and even familiar smells. The idea was to create an environment where the entity would feel at home, drawing it into the structure. Once inside, they would use jets of liquid helium to freeze it, attempting to immobilize it physically. Carla hesitated at first, but then agreed. She wanted answers, and if this could help others in the future, it would be worth the risk. Besides, she was tired of running. It was time to face whatever was chasing her. Days before the experiment began, Dr. Snyderman appeared again. He had changed a lot since the beginning of the case. Now, he fully believed Carla and wanted to ensure she was safe. He spoke to her privately, offering medical, psychological, and above all, emotional support. But at the same time, he admitted something unexpected. He had developed a personal interest in her, not just as a patient, but as a woman. Carla listened in silence, surprised, but did not return the feeling. She needed support, not romance. "I need you as a friend," she gently told him. The doctor nodded, understanding, and promised to be there no matter what happened. On the day of the experiment, everything was carefully prepared. The team set up cameras, sensors, and emergency equipment. Carla entered the fake house accompanied by only a few members of the team, ready to face her greatest fear. For the first few hours, nothing happened. The environment remained calm, almost reassuring. The researchers began to think the entity wouldn't come, or perhaps had lost interest. But then, without warning, the temperature dropped drastically. The lights flickered, and Carla felt the familiar cold run down her spine. She looked at Dr. Cooley and whispered, "She's here." Within seconds, the helium jets were activated, releasing dense, freezing mist throughout the environment. The goal was to trap the entity in a solid mass, making it visible and vulnerable. However, something unexpected happened. The entity, far from being contained, seemed to take control of the jets themselves. The pipes began to move on their own, directing the helium straight at Carla. She screamed in fear, running to protect herself, but there was nowhere to escape. It was at this critical moment that Dr. Snyderman made a risky decision. He entered the house to save her. As the liquid helium flooded the environment, he ran to Carla, grabbed her tightly, and pulled her out moments before the tanks exploded in a burst of vapor and ice. When they looked back, they saw a figure trapped in a huge block of ice, the entity finally visible. After the explosion of the liquid helium tanks, the laboratory was enveloped in thick icy fog. The air was cold and heavy, as if even time had stopped for a few seconds. Carla, still shaking and clinging to Dr. Snyderman, looked back and saw something she never imagined. A clearly visible figure trapped inside a massive block of ice. It was humanoid, but its forms were distorted, almost demonic. The creature's eyes were open, staring in her direction. Even immobilized, it seemed alive and conscious. Its face twisted in expressions of hatred and frustration, as if it knew it had been defeated, for now. Dr. Cooley and his team rushed to check the equipment and make sure no one else was injured. Everyone was impressed by what they had witnessed. For the first time, they had real evidence of a paranormal entity captured physically. "This changes everything," said Cooley, observing the frozen figure with a mix of fascination and fear. "It's not hallucination, it's not fraud. This is real." Carla, although relieved to have survived, didn't feel victorious. She knew that entity wouldn't give up so easily. It had a clear focus on her, and now possibly a desire for revenge. While technicians prepared the safe transport of the ice block for deeper analysis, Dr. Weber, the skeptical psychiatrist who had doubted Carla from the start, arrived at the site. He had heard about the experiment and decided to come, thinking he could prove it was nothing more than a collective illusion or emotional manipulation. But upon seeing the figure trapped in the ice, he simply stood in silence. For a few seconds, he just stared at the entity without saying a word. Then, he turned to Dr. Cooley and asked, "How is this possible?" His voice was low, almost inaudible, as if afraid of the answer. Cooley calmly replied, "I don't know, but you're seeing the same thing I am, aren't you?" Weber slowly nodded, but asked no more questions. Instead, he left the lab without saying goodbye, as if fleeing from something bigger than himself. With the entity trapped and the video recordings saved as proof, Carla finally had her case recognized. For the first time, she wasn't treated as crazy or hysterical. The images spoke for themselves. However, the feeling of safety lasted only a short time. That same night, when she returned to Cindy's house, Carla woke up to a low, familiar voice whispering in her ear, "You didn't trap me. You only made me stronger." She jumped out of bed, looking around, but saw no one. The voice had vanished, but the message remained engraved in her mind. Something told her the entity had escaped, or had never really been trapped at all. The next morning, Carla decided it was time to leave Los Angeles. She needed to start over far away from that negative energy that seemed to chase her for so long. A new chapter was about to begin. In the morning after that disturbing voice, Carla gathered her children and said something she had been avoiding for a long time. "We're leaving from here." She knew she couldn't stay in California anymore. That place was no longer just her home, but also a battlefield of invisible wars. With few suitcases and mixed feelings, they left Los Angeles behind. Their destination was Texas, where she had some distant relatives and hoped to find some kind of peace after years of constant terror. When they arrived in the new state, Carla sought to rebuild her life away from memories of the past. She rented a simple house in a small town, changed her routine, and tried to keep her children away from any discussion about what they had lived through. However, despite the radical change, Carla soon realized the entity hadn't completely disappeared. Although the attacks had decreased in intensity, they were still felt subtly, as if it were retreating or simply preparing to return. Sometimes, during the early hours, she would wake up to sudden cold. Other times, She would hear low voices calling her name. The sounds were weaker, almost like a distant echo, but they were still there. Despite this, Carla decided to move forward. She began seeking therapy again, now with professionals who didn't doubt her story. She also sought support groups for people reporting similar experiences. Her children, in turn, received careful psychological treatment. Both carried deep emotional scars, but with time, they began to recover part of their normality. They were afraid of the past, but also brave enough to build a different future. The case of the Moran family became known among paranormal researchers. Many scholars used the recordings and reports as a basis for future investigations into intelligent, obsessive entities. Dr. Cooley continued to follow the case from a distance, staying in touch with Carla by phone. He assured her that this was not just a rare phenomenon. It was unique. No other case recorded so much time spent with an entity so persistent. Dr. Snyderman, who had completely changed his view on the paranormal, wrote academic articles on the subject, defending the importance of listening to patients who reported unusual experiences, even when they seemed impossible. Years later, Carla gave a rare interview to a magazine specializing in supernatural cases. She spoke calmly, but firmly, "I know it sounds crazy. I doubted myself for a long time too, but I know what I went through, and I know it exists." Today, Carla lives a quiet life in rural Texas. She prefers to remain anonymous and avoids talking too much about the subject. But whenever someone asks if she believes in ghosts or entities, she answers seriously, "Not all of them are imaginary. Some are very real and very dangerous." The case of the Moran family remains one of the most intriguing in the history of parapsychology. There are no complete scientific explanations, only testimonies, videos, and physical marks that no one has ever been able to deny. But one thing is certain: Carla survived. She survived fear, doubts, attacks, and loneliness. And by sharing her story, she helped others understand that, no matter how absurd it may seem, they may not be alone. If you made it this far watching the entire video, maybe you felt something familiar in all of this. Maybe you've also experienced something inexplicable. So remember, you're not crazy, and you're not alone. If this video touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to receive notifications of new content. Together, we will explore what science still cannot explain.